In this video, I will give you 7 reasons the rule of law in the US is set to collapse. Reason number 1, the George Soros overhaul of criminal justice policy. What if I told you that the most influential person in criminal justice policy in the United States was a Hungarian billionaire? It's crazy, but sadly, it's true. I'm talking, of course, about George Soros. George Soros has donated millions of dollars to progressive district attorney candidates throughout the country. These progressive district attorneys have easily won election due to having up to 10 to 20 times the financial backing of their opponents. This has made George Soros the most influential person when it comes to making criminal justice policy in the United States, and he's even more influential than President Trump or Attorney General Jeff Sessions. So what have these progressive district attorney candidates done upon taking office? Well, many of them have vowed to stop sending criminals to prison. This is even true of prisoners convicted of the most serious crimes such as armed robbery, drug trafficking, and fraud. Some of these district attorney candidates have vowed not to prosecute minorities who commit crimes, and many have stopped enforcing crimes against immigrants entirely. Which brings us to the second reason that our rule of law will collapse. Reason number 2, immigrants in sanctuary cities are given immunity to commit crime. Imagine you and your roommate commit an armed robbery of a bank. After leaving the bank with the money, you are both arrested. You end up going to prison, but later you find out that your roommate was never even charged. Why is this the case? The answer could be that your roommate is an immigrant. Many progressive district attorneys in sanctuary cities have recently began to hire immigration attorneys. This is particularly true of the George Soros-backed district attorneys. Prior to charging immigrants or illegal immigrants with any crimes, prosecutors who work for these offices must run it by the immigration attorney. If the immigration attorney believes charging someone with such a crime could result in that person being deported, then they will instruct the prosecutor not to file the case. The insane thing about this is it means immigrants, which would include both legal immigrants and illegal immigrants, basically have immunity to commit crimes in sanctuary cities. If they commit a rape or ransack a business, they will never face punishment for their actions. This also means American citizens have less rights than immigrants in their own country. I'm going to run my intro now, and afterwards we'll go over the next 5 factors. Reason number 3, Republicans are joining forces with progressives on justice policy. Surely you would expect conservatives to push back against this new George Soros justice system. Nope, it's actually the opposite. Republicans are increasingly joining forces with progressives and backing these policies. This includes the largest political donor on the right, the Koch brothers. Why do Republicans support these policies? The reason is that they would rather not have to pay the costs of punishing criminals. I've even heard right-wing pundits, such as Stefan Molyneux, embrace the idea of ending our system of imprisoning criminals. If there is a consensus amongst Republicans and Democrats that we should stop enforcing most laws, then the rule of law will inevitably collapse. This means our rights to freedom of speech and to own property are likely no longer going to be protected by the police in the future. Reason number 4, feminists are demanding the burden of proof for sexual assault be changed to affirmative consent. Our country uses the same burden of proof standard that was used in the medieval county courts of England, beyond a reasonable doubt. That means if a jury has a reasonable doubt as to someone's guilt, they're required to find that person not guilty. This has been a hallmark of the rule of law in the US. That is until now. Feminists have been increasingly pushing to abandon the requirement that the prosecution prove lack of consent beyond a reasonable doubt in rape prosecutions. Instead, they want to change the burden of proof to affirmative consent. This would mean the suspect would be obligated to prove the sex was consensual. Obviously, this has frightening implications if you are accused of rape. You would basically have to come up with some evidence showing that the other person agreed to the sex. If you could not do so, you would be found guilty, and you would be required to register as a sex offender. Another insane thing about this is it is possible for both parties in a sexual encounter to accuse each other of rape, and both could end up being found guilty. Affirmative consent has already been established as the burden of proof on many college campuses. Increasingly, feminists are seeking to expand it to be the default burden of proof in criminal prosecutions. This has increasingly been the case after the Aziz Ansari sex scandal. Reason number 5. Artificial intelligence will make income inequality worse. Several studies show crime is highly correlated with income inequality. Being poor alone does not cause crime. If you are poor while your neighbors are not, you may become resentful. Income inequality is likely to get a lot worse with new developments in artificial intelligence. For example, there are 4.4 million Americans employed as drivers. As soon as driverless cars are approved for sale, all of those people will be fired. AI will likely replace many other jobs as well, which will contribute to mass unemployment. This will hit the US particularly hard as we have maintained the highest rate of unskilled labor immigration in the world. So what are all these unemployed people going to do with themselves? A lot of them are going to turn to crime. Reason number 6. Congress will not address border security. 94% of heroin and methamphetamine consumed in the US comes from Mexico. The massive drug supply in the US is unprecedented in the world. The US Congress is not even close to coming to any sort of deal that would address this problem by securing the border. The opioid crisis, cartel violence, and overall rate of crime and corruption are only going to keep increasing in both Mexico and the US as a result of this. US institutions are likely going to become more like Mexico's institutions, and I suspect local government corruption will rise substantially in the coming years. Reason number 7. Increased political polarization. These days, people are more and more likely to be divided and more likely to be radicalized. A perfect example of this is Antifa, a group many journalists hail as heroes. Antifa destroys and vandalizes property, they beat people up, and they always get away with it. Working as a prosecutor, I can tell you that picking a jury today is a lot different than it was 5 years ago. It is shocking now how many people just utterly hate the police after the whole Black Lives Matter movement. On the right side of things, I also see a lot more people adopting sovereign citizen type beliefs. These people reject any sort of public authority at all. The increased political polarization is leading people to believe that it just isn't necessary or important to obey the law anymore. And this will lead to a collapse of our rule of law. Well, those are the 7 reasons why I believe our rule of law will collapse in the next generation. Feel free to provide any commentary you would like. And if you liked this video, please consider subscribing or sharing it. Thank you.